Hi, and welcome to Mobile Magic, powering up your mobile photography game. And my name is Lisa Carney, and I am a finisher, a photographer, designer, a retoucher, and an educator. And I'm here to expose all my love for mobile photography and what's capable these days. Honestly, with the advancement of cameras now, holy guacamole, it's incredible what you can do with the cameras these days. The technology with the sensors. I just got my Apple 13 the other day. Can't wait to try it out. And software advancements. Oh my goodness. Lightroom's got some amazing announcements here at Max to really improve your editing and your mobile editing. I mean, it is amazing what you can do on these little devices now. And the thing that I really love about mobile and the mobile process is the accessibility. And with accessibility now, I mean, we have these devices in our hands. It's so easy and fast. And more, I'm doing my jobs on mobile devices. And one of the things I want to espouse about that is the creativity you have. So first of all, it's immediate, it's fast, you have it, the technology is amazing, but also it opens you up to this whole new app arrangement on phones and iPads. There's these crazy creative apps, tintype, mixtures. I'm going to talk just a little bit about that in this course, that you now can avail yourself of just because you're on a mobile workflow. So in this class, I'm going to talk a bit about shooting through the Lightroom cameras, which are amazing. Many folks don't even know that there's 5 cameras available on your Lightroom mobile device. Yes, 5. And then we're going to talk about editing in Lightroom Mobile. Now, Lightroom Mobile's got a whole ecosystem. We're going to talk about that. It's cross-platform, which is so handy. And then compositing. We're going to talk about how on the go, on this little teeny device, you can do compositing, you can add textures, lighting, graphics, all the best things that Photoshop does. Now, mobile. So incredibly great. So come on, let's take a look and power up our mobile photography game. So just for a few minutes, I want to look at some samples of what you can do with Lightroom cameras and Lightroom Mobile. You know, Lightroom is a darkroom in your hand. It's pretty amazing. And look at these before and afters. I mean, you can really get some pretty significant editing done, all while you're sitting on a paddleboard or on a beach or on a forest floor. That way you don't have to worry if you missed a shot. And in addition, you know, look at these creative apps. There's amazing things you can produce using inexpensive third-party apps, all on your phone or your iPad. I mean, it's remarkable, isn't it? Let's get started. So how we're going to approach this course is I'm going to give you an overview of the process, some terminology, and the functions on the device. For the actual lab, you guys will process an image in Lightroom that I will provide for you by clicking on the download button on this page. Take that image into Photoshop on the iPad and add some type and effects. Now, I would like you to encourage you to practice shooting using Lightroom camera on your own, and I'm going to talk about how you can do that. And in addition, I'd like you to know that there is a handout for this course available down below for you to download and follow along. And please remember, you can repeatedly watch this course again and again and again to pick up anything you might miss. So for the image, what we're going to use is we're going to use my darling chicken, Ruby, and we're going to take that shot of Ruby, process it in Lightroom using the brand new masking tools, which are amazing. And then we're going to export that file into Photoshop and work on Photoshop on the iPad. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about some terminology so we're all on the same page. With the mobile workflow, it's important to consider the process. So you've got an input, some kind of image. It's either a DNG, RAW, TIFF, JPEG, etc. And then generally you're going to probably have some initial processing like film looks, maybe some masking, contrast, color temperature, that sort of thing. And then we often have editing or retouching or more heavy lifting manipulation, which you would do in Photoshop. You know, beauty retouching, spotting, compositing, adding special effects, textures, graphics, that sort of thing. And then we often have an output, whether that's digital for social or giving it to your client, or printing, like going to a printing press, printing a picture for your wall, something like that. So when I say capture or input, I'm talking about, in this particular case, perhaps an iPhone or an Android, but it could be a DSLR, a Leica, Hasselblad, Sony, whatever. When I'm talking about editing or processing, I'm talking about doing that on a laptop, through the web, desktop, on a tablet like an iPad, or on a phone, iPhone, Android, whatever. And then for the output, I'm talking about you're sending it to maybe Instagram or Behance, Facebook, or are you printing it on an Epson printer? Perhaps you're sending it to Blurb and getting a photo portfolio printed or some wall art. In this course, when I'm referring to Lightroom and processing, I'm talking about processing on your mobile device, on an iPad, perhaps desktop, either a laptop or a desktop computer, and or the web. The type of processing I'm talking about in Lightroom would be like masking, doing film looks, exposure, contrast, temperature, tint, saturation, highlight and shadow manipulation, perhaps some sharpening, cropping the image, and even straightening through the geometry filter. There's so much you can do in Lightroom in terms of editing. In Photoshop for this course, we're looking at the iPad or the desktop. For this course, I'm going to strictly be using the iPad. And the kind of editing or processing I'm talking about is retouching or compositing, adding special effects, adding textures, and adding graphics. Now, I know there's a lot of overlap between Lightroom and Photoshop, and it's really up to you to figure out where it fits in your workflow. I like to incorporate more and more Lightroom and Photoshop together rather seamlessly through the cloud. Let's talk about capture now through Lightroom Mobile and an iPhone. Did you know there are 5 cameras available through Lightroom Mobile? Yes, 5. And to access them, what you do is you press and long hold on the icon for Lightroom, and then you move up to take a photo. Or what you can do when you're in the library section of Lightroom, when you're in the app, you can just click on the camera icon. So as I said, on the Lightroom Mobile app on your camera phone, there are 5 cameras: automatic, pro, HDR, long exposure, and depth capture. The depth capture and long exposure are for an iPhone only currently. When you launch your app, Lightroom, and you go to the photos, you'll notice that you only have 3 cameras available: auto, professional, HDR. You have to go back to your settings in Lightroom to actually turn on, under technology previews, those 2 cameras, long exposure and depth capture. And then you go back to your camera and you'll see all 5 are there. Let's take a look at the automatic camera. First, you'll notice that all 3 lenses are available: ultra wide, wide, and telephoto. Simply click anywhere on the viewfinder to lock focus. There's a little button here on the bottom that you can click to actually lock the exposure or unlock it. As you click around the image, you will change what is in focus. Additionally, down here at the bottom, there's a preset button, and you can actually shoot through 5 different presets. And at the top of the camera, it'll tell you which preset you're shooting through: high contrast, flat, warm shadows, high contrast black and white, or flat black and whites. Pretty cool. You can actually see the effect as you shoot. The next camera is the Pro camera, and it's a little more sophisticated. You still have those presets you can shoot through. If you click on the preset button, you can actually go back to normal. This camera also has all 3 lenses available: ultra wide, wide, and telephoto. If you change the presets while you're shooting, simply click back on that preset button and you can get to the other controls. Now here's where it gets exciting. You have exposure control that you can control with a slider. How groovy is that? And you can change your shutter speed, all with the slider. I mean, it's basically turning this into a manual camera. You have a lot of control here. You can change the ISO, and when you change the ISO, you're going to change the grain quality to the image, so you need to be a little careful. And if you change the ISO, you'll have to go back to the shutter speed to change that so you can get your exposure correct. But the control is fantastic. And then there's white balance. You can change it to tungsten, fluorescent, sunlight, cloudy day, or one of my favorites, which is custom. How cool is that? The amount of control you have on this camera is extraordinary. I'm going to talk about the auto to manual focus button on the next camera in just a minute. But I want to remind you, you can always hit the reset and start all over again. I love Lightroom. As we move to the HDR camera, you'll notice a lot of these same settings are available. There's just a few differences between these two cameras. So on the HDR camera, you still have the exposure control, you have the white balance control, and here's where that oh so groovy automatic focus, auto to manual focus. You basically control what the image is focusing by simply moving the slider. Oh, I can't tell you how much I love this. It's really cool. You should try it out. Now, the big difference between the Pro camera and the HDR is that the HDR camera shoots 3 frames. And when it shoots those 3 frames, 1, 2, 3, you can possibly get something blurred if you have a subject that is moving too fast. So for example, a teenage boy and a cat, HDR is not your best setting. And since the HDR camera and the Pro camera share so many similarities, if you have a moving object, I would suggest you go for Pro, not HDR, only in that one situation. By far, I use the HDR and Pro camera the most when I'm shooting. The long exposure camera has some similar features like exposure, second, but what I really dig is the anti-stabilization, and you probably want to have that left on. But other than that, the controls are very similar, the shutter speed or the exposure control. And again, you get the 3 lenses also with this camera. Now for my favorite camera of them all, the depth capture. Ooh, I love this camera. So the depth capture really only has 1 lens and some minimal exposure control, but why it's so awesome is it actually allows you to create a mask in Lightroom. Now this is separate from the masking function in the editing modules, but that editing module uses this mask to actually create selective edits. It's super sophisticated and amazing. So real quickly, I'm just going to get out of this image and go back to the library, and I'm just going to show you what this looks like. We'll talk more about masking later, but you'll see this little icon that looks like a ball with a plane. And when you go into the editing modules and you pick masking and you add a new mask, way at the bottom you can select depth range, and that will allow you to utilize the focus that you set during the shooting to make a mask. And you can clean it up in this process. It's pretty sophisticated. We're going to talk about this at the next section. So now I just want to talk a little bit about the camera settings that you can find at the hamburger on the upper right-hand corner. So this is where you can change the aspect ratio of your shooting. You could set a timer. You can also set a different kind of grid level, like a 4 square or a horizontal line. You can also show the highlight clipping or hide highlight clipping for your masks. And lastly, I'd like to remind you that you can shoot in RAW DNG. Yes, that is RAW file format through your Lightroom camera. You simply click at the top of the camera on the button that either says DNG or JPEG, and you'll notice it's a toggle. Well, now that we've handled capture, I hope you're inspired to go out and try those Lightroom mobile cameras. They're absolutely fantastic. And I'm supplying an image here of Ruby so that we can work on the next section, which is going to be editing, basically initial edits, using Lightroom Mobile. While we're here, I'd just like to reiterate we're using Lightroom Mobile, Lightroom on the cloud, not Lightroom Classic. We'll be using Lightroom on an iPad. We're now going to move to Lightroom on the iPad, and this is where the editing modules come into play. It's magic. It's basically a darkroom in your hand. And Lightroom has a series of 15 editing panels. In the course of this lab, we're not going to be able to go through every module. However, here at Max, there's plenty of courses on Lightroom for you to dive into. I'd like to also reiterate at this moment that you can do any of this editing on a mobile device like a phone or an iPad, or on your desktop, or even through the web on the Creative Cloud. Let's take a minute and look at some of the amazing things you can create in the new masking editing module. You can use Select Sky to select your sky and make it more dramatic, and then you can even invert that selection and sharpen up your main subject. The masking is so sophisticated in this program. Heckfire, you can even convert this to a black and white and make a beautiful image. The editing modules allow you to get a very dramatic portrait in a not so dramatic setting. Again, these new masking modules are amazing. And with versions, you can always make a secondary black and white. Lightroom Mobile is non-destruct, so you can keep them all. The editing capabilities in Lightroom Mobile are pretty astounding, and I'm going to say a little overwhelming at times. So I'm going to show you a few different edits, some of them a little extreme, some kind of minor. And I'm showing this to kind of inspire you to think about the different kind of looks you might be able to correct or create when you're using Lightroom Mobile. We're not going to be able to do all of them in this course. One of the things I want to tell you about, which is really amazing, is how dramatic you can make an image and expose for the highlights when you're capturing. That's a key. And you could do singular color adjustments. You can make black and whites with a little color in them. You can take kind of a so-so picture of a house and make it look fun and warm and inviting, all on your mobile device, either a phone or an iPad. It's pretty remarkable. Now, precisely because Lightroom can be overwhelming since there's so much variety, I'm going to suggest you check out these discovery videos. You can get them on your iPad or on your mobile device or on the desktop version of Lightroom, and they'll inspire you, and you can actually see how people have done their edits. And this hopefully will help get you kind of going down the path of creativity. All right, now it's time to get Ruby into Lightroom on your iPad. Now here's the thing about the iPad and the cloud. There's a variety of different ways to get your images in. You could, on your iPad, plug in a camera at the base and actually import it. I'm supplying Ruby to you, so you're not going to need to do this, but you should know it's available to you. You can go to your desktop version of Lightroom and import. And once any image is inside the Lightroom catalog, no matter what the device is, it will be available to you. And what we're going to do for this lab is you're going to use the Creative Cloud app. If you put Ruby on your Creative Cloud ecosystem, you'll have access to her on your iPad or any desktop, anywhere you have access to the internet. For future reference, I put a hot link here in the handout to take you to an instruction page on all the ways you can import into Lightroom on the iPad. My recommendation is that you utilize the Creative Cloud app. I love this app. So you just have to download the Creative Cloud app onto your iPad, sign into your Adobe Creative Cloud account, and then you can access the folder with this link that I provide here or by simply clicking on the download button. Once you've done that, simply click on the folder for this lab. Then you click on whatever image you want to import. So this is going to be Ruby Raw for right now. Then go down to the bottom and click on the Share button. And then you're going to click on the Download Original File button after that, and then click on Lightroom, and it'll send the image directly to Lightroom. By the way, the Creative Cloud is a great resource for quick actions and especially loading fonts into the iPad. Check it out here. Let's get started with Ruby. So you're going to want to launch Lightroom, and if you've loaded Ruby up to Lightroom through the Creative Cloud, she'll show up in your recently added. So there she is, and let's talk about what we can do with her. So the 15 modules are down here on the bottom, and you simply slide to gain access. When you click on a module, some more controls will often pop up, and you can either click OK or not. It's pretty instinctual here. So let's say, I have to tell you, whenever I start with an image, I always click the auto button. I find the auto button just gives me a nice baseline to start with. And then with Ruby, I think I want to isolate her. And because of the masking function in Lightroom Mobile now, it's absolutely amazing. I can click on the Add a Mask button and say, hey, let's select subject, because I'm going to select Ruby. And the AI technology is going to go through there and check out Ruby. There she is. Now you'll notice I have a red overlay over her, and the minute I start editing, look what's happened here on the bottom. Now my editing panels have shown up. And I think with Ruby, I'd like to give her some clarity, sharpen her up a little, and you'll notice that overlay goes away immediately. And then whenever I sharpen, I find the blacks can get a little heavy. So I'm going to go ahead and up her shadows a bit, right? And maybe go ahead and up her exposure a little bit. Now she looks a little cool to me, so I'm going to go to the color, and I'm going to bump up her saturation just a wee bit, and maybe change the tint to be a little more yellow. a little more, and maybe take out a little magenta. I'm going to let that be for just a minute, and I'm going to click the OK button here at the bottom. Now, I really do want to isolate her out from the background, and I think I'd like the background to be black and white. So I'm going to go back to masking. I'm going to add a new mask by clicking on it. And again, once again, I'm going to select subject, and the AI is going to do its beautiful magic. Only this time, what I'd like to do is invert. So I'll click the invert button, and now everything but Ruby is selected. And now, once again, the editing modules are down here on the bottom, and I can go to color, and I can say, great, let's take all that color out. Yeah, I'm digging that. And I think the light, I think I want to make it a little lighter in the back. So I'm going to bring up the shadows just a hair in the background. Keep in mind, I'm working on the background. And I think I'm going to blur the background a little. So I'm going to take the clarity down by going to the effects panel. And maybe take the texture down. This way, Ruby is really showing up. Let's see. Yep, there's my girl. I really love her. So, let's talk about the masking for a second. Do you notice there's a slight problem here? It accidentally got a little of the grass. No big deal. When you go back to the masking, do you see this little icon here? You can pull out your mask and you can rename it. I'm going to rename Ruby. Really, really helpful to name your mask because it gets confusing. You can have many of them. I'm going to say okay. And then on the top one, I'm going to call that background. It adds to it. No big deal. And background. There we go. I'm going to hit OK on that. Now, on this background, I can click on this mask here and the background mask. And I can say I would like to add to the mask. Because what I want to do is I want to pick the brush. I've got a little teeny brush here. I'm going to move this over. And I want to add to the grayscale mask. So now I can just click. And I'm using the Apple Pencil. And I can paint out, I mean, the control is amazing. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? And once I'm happy, I hit OK. There's my girl. Now let's see. Is there anything else overall I'd like to do? Yeah, you know what I might like to do? I'm going to slide over here, and on the effects panel, there's this really cool thing called a vignette. And I can add a vignette. I'm going to make it really dark so you can see it. A vignette to Ruby. I'm going to change the midpoint to make it go in a little further. And then I'm going to feather the heck out of it so it's really soft. Now that's a little heavy for me, so I'm going to come back and pull back on the vignette. And I'm going to say okay to that. When you're done, all you do is click on the little staple at the top, as I like to call it. You know what? I'm really happy with Ruby. I'm going to say this is done. There is a ton you can keep doing. There's color panels, there's light panels, there's sharpening panels. You're going to want to take some other courses and dig deeper into Lightroom. There's so much you can do. And the coolest thing about this is this file is completely and always will be non-destruct. So I can always click the reset button and go all the way back to open if I'm not happy. If I want to save this as a version, I can click here to versions and create versions. And I'm going to call this number 2 because I already have a version there. Number 2. Create. And now I have multiple versions. I can go back to the original Ruby. I can go back to my practice Ruby. I can go to my current Ruby. Isn't that exciting? And now that I see that I'm on the current Ruby, I think I do want her to be a little less blue. I'm going to go back to the masking. Do you see how often you can go back and forth? It's utterly amazing. Go back to Ruby, and I want to change her color. I want less magenta in her. Just pick the sliders. Here we go. I love this application. All right, I'm going to call this done. So what do we do with it now? Let's go to Photoshop on the iPad. Click the send button. Export as. Want to make sure it's a DNG. I'm exporting as a DNG to keep the file completely editable, and I'm putting it on the cloud so it's accessible to all my Creative Cloud apps. Wait, isn't there a simpler way to get this into Photoshop on the iPad? Yes. You can also simply click Send File, Edit in Photoshop. I just like to have a backup copy on my Creative Cloud. It's kind of redundant, but it's how I prefer to work. All right, learning a new device can be challenging. Let's talk a little bit about the iPad and how it works. So you can move your image around, you can rotate it with your fingers, you can squeeze to make something smaller or pull out to make it larger. And these little gestures are just going to help to figure out what it is you need to use to work on this program. So some of the other gestures I'd like to talk about is, let's say if we added a adjustment layer, and I'll go over this later, and we wanted to undo that effect. If you double tap with 2 fingers, you will undo the gesture. If you use 3 fingers, it will go back to the way it was before. So that's a 2 and a 3 finger gesture. When you're on a tool and there's a little toolbar there, if you can click and drag that and move that all over the place. That can be handy because the real estate's kind of valuable, isn't it? In addition, any tool with a triangle on it, if you double tap on it, you'll get the hidden features underneath it. This is really going to be important. And if you double tap, so let's say I make this image little. If I double tap with a single finger, it will go back to 100% size. And I do want to remind you, you can pinch and drag and move, and this is really handy when you want to get in there and work. And if you use a keypad with your iPad, you can use keyboard shortcuts. That's pretty handy. Probably the most important thing to know about working with Photoshop on the iPad is the touch shortcut. There is a primary touch and a secondary touch. There's going to be a guide on the handout for this. Let me talk to you about the guide for a second. Here's the thing about Photoshop on the iPad. As you can see, you've got a lot of the similar functions in the desktop version of Photoshop, but because of the real estate, everything has to be buried or hidden under different functions or touch bars or double taps, and it can be really confusing. So in this class, I can only go over so much, but I've given you a guide here where I've called out where the layer view is, the layer properties, sharing comments, what's a single tap, what's a double tap, where can you find the filters? And what I'm hoping is, because I don't want to overwhelm you all, is that when you look at this guide, you can go, oh, when I'm on the move tool, oh, it's a single tap, and I can use primary touch to move to the XY axis, or a secondary touch will actually duplicate the layer. And I hope that this will help you look at this guide later, still be inspired, find new things inside the program. Because I'm going to be honest, this is what really was the hardest thing for me, was when I was brushing. I was like, oh, geez, how do I get my brushes? All those brushes I have on the cloud, how do I get them? And it was a little frustrating initially, but now I have a guide, and every once in a while I pull the guide out and I look at it and I go, oh, right. Under the spot healing, there's heal, and there's clone. And how do I assign an area? Where's it going to take the clone from? Oh, right. That's the primary touch button. So I'm hoping you guys can use this guide to move along. The gradient tool, very unsophisticated right now. But the other thing about the iPad is they're always coming up with new technology. This thing will be updated again and again and again. And I think you'll really be pleased with the type of work you can create on this device. One thing I want to point out is on the type. Just like we loaded the pictures through the Creative Cloud, you load your fonts through the Creative Cloud as well. So that's handy to know. And when you do your place images down on this button, you can place from your photo roll, you can place from the cloud, you can place from your creative libraries that you already have in Photoshop desktop, or heckfire, you can use the camera. That's kind of cool too. So there's a lot to this. Please don't be overwhelmed, and know that you have a guide to reference. In particular, I want to point this out. It took me 20 minutes to find out how to change my window from dark to light for this demonstration, and it's under the account settings. So when you're in the home window on the iPad, Photoshop for the iPad, that's where you click the home, you can change your app settings. In addition, this is where you can find tutorials, view gestures, and touch shortcuts in case you forget them. Now that we have some logistics out of the way, let's go ahead and start creating on the iPad. So here's what we're doing. We're taking that capture of Ruby and then the edit we did in Lightroom, and we're going to make a graphic, like a social media for Ruby and her eggs. The items you're going to use are the edited image from Lightroom, a Ruby logo PNG that I've supplied, as well as a lens flare and a screen pattern. And the idea here is we're going to use the best parts of Photoshop, like why you want to use it: spotting, compositing, special effects, textures, that kind of thing. let's get started with Ruby. So I've opened Photoshop on my iPad, and down here on the bottom, you have two buttons. You have Create New or Open, Import and Open. I'm going to click on Import and Open, and I'm going to click on my Files button, and then I'm going to navigate to my Creative Cloud, where I have saved my DNG edited file of Ruby. Here she is. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now this is very important. Please pay attention to this. In the upper right-hand corner, we have two options. You have Import as a layer, which will import her as a regular Photoshop PSD, or Import as a smart object, which will allow Ruby to remain an editable raw file. And that's what we want for maximum flexibility. And here we go. Now I'd like to pause for just a second and talk a little bit about the interface on Photoshop for the iPad. So here is the compact layer view. You can click on this to get that to show. Here is the detailed layer view. I'm going to be honest, this is the one I prefer because it looks most like the original Photoshop. These are the layer attributes or layer properties panel. And then down here below we have add new layer, layer visibility, add a layer mask, clip, filters and adjustments, and more layer actions. Okay, so now we've got the structure handled there. The next thing I want to call attention to is notice I can move Ruby around because effectively I'm in the hand tool. And how you get back to here is if you click the move tool, you are in the move tool, brush, you're on a brush, clone, paint bucket, etc. But if you want to get back to the hand, you click on the move tool twice. And now I'm back on the hand, and wow, isn't this cool? It's kind of like working on a Cintiq. Very fancy. All right, let's get to the next step. I generally like to have a plan of attack. So let's do this. We're going to copy the layer of Ruby to retouch on. We're going to lift Ruby off her background, basically mask her. We're going to put a logo behind her, add a lens flare, add a texture, and then we're going to put a blurred logo between Ruby and her logo so that it reads better. First order of business is to duplicate Ruby because I want to retouch on her, but I want to keep a layer safe. So on the layer, if I go to new layer actions, I can say, hey, duplicate layer. And then see the icon? This is still a raw smart object. So I'm going to add a layer, a blank layer, and I'm going to then say, hey, Photoshop on the iPad, do me a favor. Can I select multiple layers? Yes, I can. And with those two layers selected, if I again click on the layer action palette, I can say, hey, merge those layers. And now I have a pixel-based copy on top. Let's call it Retouch because we like to keep good work habits. And now, if I close that, I'm ready to retouch. I'm going to make sure I'm on my retouch layer. And what I'm going to do is then go to the Spot Clone Heal tool. And when I click on it, you'll see if I double tap, I've got Spot Heal, Heal Brush, and Clone Stamp. And I want the Spot Heal brush. And you'll notice down below is where the brush is, and it's set at 36. And I'm using my Apple Pencil. I can zoom in here. I love that. And I can just, oops. I like to go to my hand real quick to pan over. So one little thing I get a little funny about. And then I'm going to just keep doing my heel. A little sloppy today. Using my little heel tool. And you know, I think for now, this is probably good enough. I'm going to go back to my move tool, make sure I'm on the hand, double click, and I have spot healed. Oh, I noticed I missed a few spots. I'm going to just real quickly go in here and there, and bada bing, I have cleaned up Ruby's background. The next thing I want to do is mask out Ruby. So I'm going to once again make a duplicate of that layer by clicking Layer Actions, Duplicate Layer. I'm going to name this by double tapping on it, on the name, Ruby Alone. Seriously, folks, get in the habit of naming your layers. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the lasso tool and click on it, double tap, and go to Select Subject. And Photoshop's going to say, hey, what do you want to select? Yep, you want to select Ruby? In fact, I did. And I'm going to go back. Notice on the bottom, there's Deselect, Mask, Erase, Invert, Refine Edge, or Transform Selection. I'm just going to click on Mask. And let's go back up to Ruby. Oh, I didn't click on it hard enough. There we go, tap on mask and Ruby is now masked. Next order of business is number 3, place logo behind her. So what I'd like to do is be underneath the Ruby layer. I'm gonna go ahead and close that. And now I'm gonna go to place image. And when I click on that or tap on that, I can go to my files and I'm gonna navigate to our class L460, go to those images, and I've given you a logo, Ruby logo, PNG. And I'm gonna go ahead and place that. Notice the transform button is up in case I wanna move this. I'm going to just click done because I like the position the way it is. As a habit, I double tap on move to make sure I'm in the home tool, and look, there's my image. I think this is looking pretty cool. Listen, if some of the masking needs to be refined, we can go back later and do it. I like to just kind of build my file up as I go. Next step, number 4, is add lens flare. So I want to click or tap on my layers palette and make sure I'm above the logo but below Ruby. And I'm tap again to close that. I'm going to go to place image and I'm going to go to files and I'm going to navigate back to the files that we all are sharing on this lab. And I can't really see where it is right now in terms of the piece. So I'm just going to click done. Please note the transform buttons are up. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to the layers property for that layer. And I'm going to change it from blend mode normal to screen. Yep, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to tap on the layers property, close that up. Now I can go to the transform tool and I can move her flare. I can rotate her flare. There's this handy dandy handle up here too. And I can position this pretty much anywhere I like. I think I like that for now. So I'm going to go ahead and click done. So flare is in position. I'm going to double tap with one finger to center her back up. And now the next order of business is to put that texture in. So I think I'd like to put the texture, let's see, above the logo, but below the lens flare. Let's see if we like that. Again, go to image place, files, and the texture I'm giving us is the screen door pattern. And this is kind of a workaround between adding patterns to Photoshop on the iPad until you actually can functionally do them. So here's my attempt now, and I'm going to say done. And then what I'm going to do is click on the layers property again and change that blending mode from normal to, I think soft light's going to be good. Let's try soft light. Yep, that looks pretty good. And then I can just double tap, excuse me, on the layers property and the thing. Yep, I think that looks pretty good. Let's take a look. Yep, nice texture. All right, double tap with my single finger. And I'm thinking she's looking pretty darn good. Now we need to work on that logo. All right, here's the plan for the logo. You can't read it. It's behind Ruby. So I just want the name Ruby and Fresh to be in front of Ruby so that you can actually read the logo. In fact, maybe just the name Ruby. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the layers palette and I'm going to look at my logo down here. And once again, I'm going to click on the additional layers action down below and I'm going to say duplicate that layer. And I'm going to rename it by double clicking on the name, double tapping, and say Ruby logo top. Then I know which one it is. And then I'm in the layers palette and I'm going to literally put my finger on that name and just move it on top. Yep, in position. Now here's what I like to do to help myself. I'm going to turn the eyeballs off every other layer. So all I can see is the logo. And then I'm going to, let's try the whole thing. I'm going to take the lasso tool and I'm going to double tap and I'm going to get the marquee and I'm going to click and drag. Actually, I didn't click and drag that so well. Click and drag. I'm going to zoom in to make sure I got the whole logo. Yes, I did. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on the mask icon. And now I've applied that mask. Let's double tap. Go back to the hand. That's my safety measure. Double tap. Go back to the layers palette and turn everybody back on. Yep, Ruby's in position. That's awesome. Although we kind of have a problem, don't we? You can't read it. So I think I'm going to have to make a blur underneath. Yep, I'm going to have to make a blur. So how are we going to do that? Like all things Photoshop, there's many ways to do the same thing. So let's go ahead and click on the layer palette here. We'll do the quick view. And I'm going to just tap on the Ruby logo. And I'm going to say, hey, let's duplicate that. Thank you. And then I'm going to tap on the plus sign and put a new layer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the eyedropper and I'm going to see about picking a goldish color. I like that color. Now I'd like to actually go back to this palette because I can see it a little better. I'm going to go to the paint bucket and I'm just going to tap and I'm going to fill that layer. And check out this. I can go down to the right hand side here and tap on the clip layer, and it is going to clip that color to that logo. And what I'm going to do real quickly is I'm going to go back to the layers action. I'm going to say, hey, can we select multiple layers? I have now selected these two layers together. And then again, layer action, I'm going to say, hey, can you merge those? And now I've got a ruby logo that's colored. Let's call it blur again. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move that logo by grabbing it by its name below ruby alone. But no, I'm sorry, above ruby, but in between the logo and ruby. And then I'm going to close that and I'm going to go to the filters. And that we have a Gaussian blur filter, and I'm going to pick up Gaussian blur, and do you see the amount comes up here on the left hand side? And now I can blur the holy heck out of that. And now you can read the ruby logo. Hit done. And if I wanted to, I could go to the layers property for that layer and maybe change it to a screen mode or overlay or something to see if we like it better. I kind of don't. I think I like it. Let me try screen. Yeah, screen's all right. Screen or normal. Let's just call that done. I'm going to close those palettes. The cool thing about Photoshop on the iPad is you can keep making editing changes. And I like that, you know, if you want the compact view, cool. If you like the extended view, cool. Use whichever one you like. And I'm looking at Ruby and I'm thinking, I think I want that lens flare over the top of Ruby. Let's see how that looks. And I'm going to go ahead and close that for a second. I can go to the move tool. And maybe I want to move that around a little bit. Yeah, I think I want that a little higher up. Let's go back to the hand by double tapping again. Yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. And then don't forget there's other adjustment layers here. So if I click plus and I say, hey, let's pick some adjustment layers. What if, for example, I wanted to use a color balance and I wanted to warm this piece up, make it look a little more breakfast delicious. How's that? Yeah, that's kind of nice too. I think I like this one. So you have a lot of options and you can keep editing, and then check out this for exporting. So I want to talk about this for 1 second. I can do a quick export, which I use often to send to third-party apps for filters and whatnot. I can do a publish and export. And if I do a publish and export, look at this. I can do a PNG, JPEG, PSD, TIFF. I can change the quality size. I can change the format. So you have a lot of options here. And if I send out this file, I can do some extra work. So have some fun. Photoshop on the iPad is pretty cool. And what I love about the iPad is it also gives you all sorts of accessibility to third-party apps. There's a lot under the hood for the export send file. And you know, why not try exporting a live stream to Behance? How fun is that? And publish and export, there's even more under the hood. So if you do the PNG, there's large, medium, and small. And for the JPEG, you have more choices. So don't hesitate to click around there. And then seriously, that quick export is awesome when you're ready to use third-party plugins or filters or applications on your iPad. Well, as you can see, there are a lot of options available to you on this whole ecosystem, this whole mobile cloud system. So while you're in Photoshop, don't be afraid to try different textures, different colors, different tonal values. There's so much to explore here. And check out your libraries in Photoshop Desktop. You can save lots of textures and elements and then utilize them on your iPad. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope this class gave you a little insight to what is possible out of mobile photography nowadays. It's getting better and better all the time. And yeah, it's just freeing, isn't it? And try out some new apps. See what you can do on the fly on your iPad or in your phone. And you know, these are perfectly serviceable for jobs. Get out there and push your social stuff out in minutes. And maybe go find some neighborhood chickens and shoot and be creative and be brave. And listen, here's the one last thing I do want to mention. Technology is new and ever growing. Sometimes these programs are going to crash. Sometimes you're going to find an app you like, and then a month or a year or 2 years later, it's no longer going to be available. Okay, so move on and find something new. Don't get locked in. This is all ever changing and growing and expanding. Grow with it. Happy shooting.